Assalamu alaikum, and peace and blessings be upon all of you. My name is Sharik Abdul Ghani, and I'm the director of Minaret Foundation, where our focus is to lift American Muslim voices for sustainable change through multi-faith and civic engagement. Joining us today is Sima, running for Congressional District 2 as part of our candidate Q&A series, where we interview candidates running for office and learn more about their stance on issues concerning not just the Muslim community, but the multi-faith community as well. Welcome, Sima.
It is such an honor being here. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Sharik, for having me. And I'm excited to be in front of the Minaret Foundation group.
And here's the thing about today. Today's is a little bit special, not just because you're here with us, of course, but also because you are the last candidate that we're interviewing for this election season. It's been a long journey. I think you're the 19th candidate that we've had a great conversation, and hopefully we're gonna have a great conversation with you as well. But the previous 18 candidates we had terrific conversations with, and we didn't just learn more about their platform, but we also had an opportunity to learn more about them as well. And I hope we'll be able to do that with you today.
Absolutely, would love that.
So let's jump right in. Could you give us the broad strokes of your platform?
Absolutely. So just a little bit about me. I am originally from Iran. My family and I, left because of the political revolution, came here, started from scratch here as immigrants. And I've been in Houston for the past 30 years. I'm an attorney. I'm also a cancer survivor. So healthcare has always been very important to me. So the number one thing on my platform is healthcare, because in a state like Texas, which we were the last covered, before the pandemic, 1 out of 5 adults didn't have healthcare. After the pandemic, it's 1 out of 3. In Harris County alone, where my entire district is, we have 1 out of 7 children who do not have healthcare. So the fact that I'm also running against someone who has been trying to gut healthcare and take away healthcare and voted against so many things, it's even more personal to me. And he also campaigned on bringing down prescription drug prices. And he went to DC, got a bunch of money, voted against a bill, and didn't do it. So my number one thing is to make sure that healthcare is a universal right. I want to make sure that everybody has access to high quality healthcare. We have to expand the ACA, make it more accessible. We have to make sure that we subsidize the premium and make the cost of it feasible for everyone. There are so many people who have lost their jobs because of this pandemic. We have to open the enrollment to make sure that they are covered. I'm also a strong believer of pushing the public option for allowing Medicare for everyone else who wants to do it. And of course, we live in a state that our governor did not expand Medicaid, which is so important to do that for so many people.
The uninsured capital of the country.
Absolutely, 100%. And we also need to make sure that we protect people with pre-existing condition. Just in my district alone, we have 340,000 people with pre-existing condition. COVID in itself is going to be a pre-existing condition. The fact that my opponent, Dan Crenshaw, is supporting Trump, pushing to, take away all kinds of protection with people with pre-existing condition is just unconscionable. And that's something that I want to fight for. And I want to fight for lowering prescription drug prices. Having been lucky enough to have had insurance during my treatment, I was able to afford my medication. 90,000 people a year die because they cannot afford their prescription medication. So we have to allow Medicare to negotiate it down the same way the VA hospital does it, so that people have access and don't have to decide between going bankrupt or putting food on their table and having to deal with their prescription drug prices. So I am very passionate about healthcare on so many levels, and that is a big thing that I'm running on. So I'm glad we're talking about it.
So you addressed your thoughts on cuts to Medicaid. It's clear that you don't want any cuts to Medicaid, that you actually want to expand it. But tell us more about veterans. What would you do to improve the delivery of timely, quality health care to veterans? As we know disproportionately they suffer the most from PTSD for obvious reasons, but also the suicide rate because of that PTSD, because of mental illness issues, is incredibly high. And not just high, it is the highest in America. What would you do to improve the delivery of timely, quality healthcare to our veterans?
I mean, look, we have to take care of our heroes. We owe them such a huge debt. And it's not just healthcare, it's just everything else to make sure we pay back our big debt to what they have done for this country. So I know mental health care is number one. You know, Harris County is the largest provider, the Harris County Jail is the largest provider of mental health care that we have, which is just completely unconscionable to me. So like everything else, we have to make sure that there is high quality, accessible healthcare to our veterans and everybody else, and especially on the mental health care issue. And we need to handle a rate of homelessness within our veteran community. So it's something that will be top on my agenda, and I've been working with, and especially like even during this situation, I've been working very closely with the VA hospital to see how we can help them, whether it's with masks, with PPE, with, you know, any way we can help to make sure that our veterans have the access to healthcare that they can. But in Congress, I will just make sure that we have healthcare for everyone, including our veterans.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Coming to issues related to education, but specifically the school to prison pipeline. There are many stories of students that have been expelled or suspended within their elementary school years. I'm talking pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, third grade. One specific story from LSU struck us when a boy who was expelled from elementary school was arrested at the age of 15, and his education was so disrupted in his early years that he didn't even learn how to properly read until he was 16. This isn't some foreign country. This is the United States. Expulsion often leads to arrest in adolescence, which then leads to prison early on. And this phenomena, as you're well aware, is referred to as a school to prison pipeline. What is one concrete step or policy decision you would take to combat the school to prison pipeline in the United States?
I mean, look, having been an immigrant and having come here, I understand how much education can change the path for anyone. So it is important to make sure that we have high quality, affordable education for everyone. And this is really addressing what has been going on, which is the systemic racism going on in our Black and brown communities, that to begin with, there's no investment in the community and the school system to make sure that there's enough funding, first of all, to make sure that those opportunities are allowed for everyone, and that there's a leveling the playing field. And it's very clear that our brown and Black kids are being prosecuted, disproportionately in this situation, and a second chance is not there. So we have to bring down the dropout rate, and that is really by investing as a whole, the community and the federal government, to have more money in our public schools so that we stop this education injustice and address the systemic racism that's going on.
Well, so children specifically of color have fallen victim to unequal policing and disciplinary policies in schools. And you mentioned that. You mentioned BIPOC are just disproportionately affected by it. But what's one way that you would ensure that children would have equal access to schooling, to opportunity, and to safety?
I would make sure that there is proper funding coming to the schools. And we have other programs to make sure that there's after-school program. The most important thing is that there isn't proper funding coming to the public school that are in these neighborhoods, because it's obviously based on so many tax reasons and other reasons. But that is something that I'm going to push for, that there's proper funding coming, so that teachers are paid well, that there are programs available, and also really pay attention that the treatment of Black and brown kids are not the same. Obviously the criminal justice system reform needs to be done. The way there is disproportionately really finding, whether it's marijuana or drug handling, the way it's handled with white kids or Black and brown kids. So we have to address all those issues. Right. But I would think the most important thing is we need to bring funding to these schools.
Funding. Okay, and that's definitely a terrific perspective, because if there's funding, then it allows for more social workers, it allows for case managers. So instead of suspending children or giving them to the school resource officers for them to handle, there's different alternative path lines. Almost reminds me of a drug court in terms of where there's alternative forms of punishment. So instead of just saying everyone go to jail, well, why don't we identify the root of the problem and fix the root of the problem?
I mean, look, the whole fact that there's a disproportionate sentencing if you're dealing with crack cocaine or cocaine is already a disproportionate thing. It should all be the same. The fact that there's just so many things we can address, but I do believe the first thing is to make sure that we have proper funding in the schools, to make sure we have other ways, and of course deal with completely revamping the criminal justice reform system.
Switching gears a little bit again, going towards issues of religious freedom. In 2019, HRES 745 was a bill urging the Republic of India to end the restrictions on communications and mass detentions, specifically as it relates to Kashmir, and preserve religious freedom. And it was presented very swiftly. If you're elected, what would your stance be on preserving religious freedom for minority groups in areas such as Kashmir, or in Myanmar, or in India, or even in Xinjiang province in China, where millions have been sent to detention centers by the CCP?
I mean, look, we have to, as a country, we stand for protecting all forms of religion and religious minority. So this is what this country stands for. First, we have to gain back our global leadership in the world, which is something that we have lost, our global respect in the world, which we have lost, and make sure that we are back as leaders so that we can instill all the ideas that are important part that are part of our constitution and our democracy, which is freedom of religion and standing for the vulnerable and fighting for that. So I think the most important thing to get to that stage so that then we can make a difference in all these situations.
Well, Sima, moving on from the Uyghurs in Myanmar, there's an issue that's particularly hot, and it has been hot for many decades, and it's affected generations of people, and that's the issue in Israel and Palestine. And that touches upon many things. It touches upon religious freedom, it touches upon oppression, it touches upon just the community of nations and safety, and ensuring that there's stability in such an important region of the world itself, the Middle East, North Africa region. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has gone on for decades, but there's been no solid solution thus far. And the solutions that we have been presented with, they either crumble before signing or crumble right after signing. Since the beginning, there have been blockades, rumors of annexation, and so much more in the recent peace negotiations. And one such event took place in 2007. And since 2007, Israel has instituted blockade in Gaza. So I have a two-part question. Should the Israeli blockade of Gaza be lifted? And given the current state of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, do you believe annexation would create peace, or would it escalate conflict?
Look, I believe that we need to bring the parties to the table, and without both parties at the table, we can't do anything. And again, putting the US as the country that can bring this kind of a conversation in, we have lost our place in the world to be able to do that. And I'm a strong believer, I'm a mediator by trade, by an attorney, and I've done this a lot to bring people to the table to find real lasting solutions. And in this area of the world, more than anything else, this is what we need. We cannot have unilateral annexation or any kind of unilateral action, because it's not going to really give into any kind of lasting peace. So we have to make sure that we push for a two-state solution that is fair and acceptable to both sides, as us at this United States of America coming in and helping that happen, and making sure that we provide for freedom of religion, every justice, equality, everything that stands here should apply there. But again, I go back to what I say is that we need to go back to gain our standing in the world, to be able to make a difference with all the partners in the area, to bring lasting peace in an area that has been in conflict forever and ever.
Well, you mentioned that we have to bring our standing back, and I couldn't agree more. And I don't think there's many people out there that wouldn't agree with you on that. What do you feel is, so let's say we do get our standing back in the world, and God willing, we will get our standing back. What will be the role of the United States in preserving religious freedom, not just in the United States of America, but what's the role of our nation in ensuring the preservation of religious freedom throughout the world?
Look, the fact that we've had a lot of rhetoric of hatred and division right here in this country, we had a mosque burned out here in Victoria, if you remember, 2 years ago because of what the president had said. The fact that that kind of terminology is out there is the first thing or the Muslim ban we have to address. And I know Vice President Biden has said on his first day he's going to lift the Muslim ban. And then I'm running against someone who, as of a month ago, Dan Crenshaw, voted against a bill that basically said, do not discriminate because of your religion, do not discriminate because you're Asian during COVID, and he voted against it. So to begin with, we have to make sure that we change that here right now and stop all this rhetoric of hatred and division in this country. And that is why this election matters, and that is why it matters that we elect the correct leadership and get rid of what is there right now, because this is not happening here. Once that happens, then it is our duty, our role as this country to make sure that we export it and we stand up for freedom of religion everywhere.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up the Muslim ban, because that brings us right to our next question. That's about Islamophobia, because, you know, in recent history and in this election cycle, Congress people have shared worrisome posts, and their appointees and their staff have just leveraged social media, speaking engagements to not just spur hatred of the other, but specifically Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia. And recently, self-proclaimed Islamophobe Laura Loomer, who won the GOP nomination in Florida as well. Just the amount of hateful rhetoric that came from her campaign, from the campaign of many others in the South, surrounding Muslims is terrifying for all. But nonetheless, we find out that they're continuously successful in their campaigns. It doesn't seem to be an issue. It gets them thrown out of the race. It's the more Islamophobia you say, the more Islamophobia you tout, it seems that you just keep scoring points.
But exactly, that's why elections matters. You need to elect people that actually don't do that, brings people together and stop that kind of a, you know, not saying anything about, you know, the white supremacists. I mean, we have a president who doesn't say anything. My opponent actually doesn't say anything about it. You know, we have to change leadership to make sure that we have people who actually stand up for what's right against Islamophobia, against anti-Semitism, against racism, against bigotry, against xenophobia. And that's why it matters. We have 2 more days of election, and then we have Tuesday as our main election day. This is why I want to emphasize how much it matters. Your vote counts. So you need to go out and vote for people who will stand up for your right and not against your right, and stand up for what matters. I personally, as an Iranian, as an immigrant, as a woman of color, as a Muslim born, I have had to deal with a lot of these things, but it depends who's on top and who protects our interests and who looks out for us. And this is not the kind of leadership we have. This is not the kind of leadership that the Trump administration has put out. This is not the kind of leadership that Dan Crenshaw has had. So we need to go out and vote and make sure we have the proper leadership.
If you are elected to office, representing the people of the 2nd Congressional District, will you stand against all forms of hate, regardless of which party it comes from?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say when I'm elected to office. But yes, I will absolutely stand. There is no place for hatred anywhere in this world, in this country, you know, especially in this country of all places, and anywhere in the world. Absolutely. And again, I want to say, like, as I may be running as a Democrat, but I'm running to represent everybody. I don't care if you're Republican, Independent, or Democrat. I call myself a Houston Democrat. I believe I want to represent the people of this district for what is fair, for what is right, for all the injustices that are happening, for our healthcare, for our climate, for our children. Again, I'm here to represent everyone.
Well, switching topics a little bit to climate change. Since 2016, there have been numerous policy decisions which have put us on the wrong side of climate science, namely removing altogether the restrictions on high-polluting industries and defunding their oversight. And while our military continues to openly acknowledge the threats of climate change, and they make adjustments to our military bases overseas because of climate science, our civilian government continues to question whether in fact it is even real. As a Houstonian, and as being the hub of the global oil and gas industry, some recent calls for climate reform have been slightly alarming, such as asking for a complete and total ban on fossil fuels altogether, which would it would devastate our local economy. As you mentioned, when elected, what is one step you would take to move our country in the right direction as it relates to climate change?
Look, we've all had to deal with climate change. We've been flooded so many times. I've personally swam home many, many times. Our car has been flooded. So climate change is real here. We need to address our infrastructure and make sure we're ready for the next flood, which we're not. And I would get back into the Paris Accord immediately, get back with the other countries. And that's the first step that we need to go towards. And we need to start moving towards a renewable energy. We are the energy state of the nation. We want to stay the energy state of the nation. I want to have an all-inclusive solution. In my district alone, we have 15,000 jobs in renewable energy. And I think a lot of it is we want to create jobs while protecting our climate and moving into the next century.
So do you believe in a phased out process of fossil fuels over a long 30 to 50 year span? Do you believe that we should just end it right away? What would your approach be?
I believe we need to do it all at the same time. We need to move towards renewable energy, use natural gas to do that. We need to make sure we do it in a clean way, and at the same time look into every innovative way that there is to protect the climate on all fronts, from everything that's going on right now.
So speaking about jobs, what would you have a plan or a policy or even ideas in place on how we would essentially retrain people who focused 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the petroleum industry and then shift them towards green jobs? Because we have an abundant amount of opportunities for solar energy, for wind energy. If you just go down towards South Texas, we were in South Padre just the other week, just on the way to Corpus Christi and beyond Corpus Christi, we see enormous windmill farms. But jobs had to be created and people had to be retrained for those purposes. Would you have a policy measure that you put some thought into, or ideas on how we can get people phased into green energy?
I mean, look, first we need to invest in our infrastructure. So that will create a lot of jobs, but we really need to put a lot of money and reinvest in the infrastructure to help, first of all, be ready for the next flood that comes. And I absolutely believe we need to put money into getting people apprenticeships available, new ways for people to become more involved in the new technologies that are out there, to learn how to be solar panel installers or technicians for wind. But there's just so many things that we need to add and make sure that our job community has access to choose what they want to do and have the training available to be able to do that.
Excellent. And now leading to the conclusion of our interview with our last question, which is, how does your faith or your spirituality drive your decision-making process?
I think every day I wake up thinking that I'm here because I want to help my neighbors. I'm here because I want to do good for this planet. I'm here because we all live under this same beautiful sky. So it does drive me every single day, because I think we all are one big family and we have to make sure we all live in harmony and work towards peace. And this is what this country is about. That is why this election is so important, because we need new leaders that do not put out that kind of hatred that has been out there. And this is what we want to do. We want to heal this nation. We're fighting for the soul of this nation. And I think about this every day. I know we can do that with Joe Biden on the top of the ticket. And then, of course, me in Congress in this seat.
Very good. My name is Sharik Abdul Ghani, and I'm the director of Minaret Foundation, where our focus is to lift American Muslim voices for sustainable change through multi-faith and civic engagement. Today, we were joined by Sima, running for CD2, and she's running for election over here against her opponent, Congressman Dan Crenshaw. Thank you again for joining us, Sima. Very much appreciated, especially since you're the one closing out our candidate Q&A series as our 19th candidate. Very much appreciate your time that you spent with us, especially because early elections are happening right now. And I bet the moment you leave here, you're going straight to the polls, or you're going to go knock on some doors or give people make a few phone calls.
Absolutely. I just want to say how grateful I am here. I want to tell everyone, please take at least 5 of your friends. Make sure they go and vote. This is such an important election. I'm honored to be serving. I'm honored to be serving this community. I'm honored to be part of this community and a member of this community. Also, please check out my website. It's tx.com. We still need volunteers to make phone calls, text, door knocks, and be at the polls to represent and really push people to go out and vote. And just really looking forward to representing you, working with you, and making this a better place to live.
Thank you again, Sima. Thank you for being so generous with your time, and best of luck to you. For those who want to watch our previous videos, you're welcome to go to minaretfoundation.com and see the entire list of videos of people that we've interviewed before. Thank you again for tuning in, and thank you for being a part of the journey.
Thank you so much.
God bless.